Mr. Wood, according to the GAO, there are at least 140,000 abandoned hard rock mine features just on federal land. And GAO actually points out itself that that information where those sites are is so lacking that the true number may actually be closer to 500,000 features on public land alone. That leads into the dynamic that you described of something like 40% of headwater streams being impaired, places that should run clear and be home to trout running orange and acidic, which certainly impacts both irrigation, municipal water supplies. Walk us through what the primary impediments are to being able to clean up those sites, and how much of it is purely a resource constraint?
Well, thanks to your good work, sir, on the Good Samaritan remediation of abandoned Hard Rock Mines Act, one of the primary problems, liability issues, are at least they're being addressed in a pilot program over the next 7 years. But the single largest, the most fundamental challenge that we face on cleaning up abandoned mines is that there's no dedicated funding source for it. So TU has managed to do about 50 abandoned mine cleanups around the country. And the way we're able to do that in spite of the liability is we get federal agencies to agree to hold the liability for us. And it's only on public land that we can do that. But we have to beg, borrow, and steal to get that money. It's membership dollars. It's the mining industry, frankly, has been generous in supporting a lot of abandoned mine cleanups. Foundations, private citizens, there's no, unlike with coal, unlike with oil, unlike with gas, there's no dedicated funding source that we can rely on.
Mr. Barrick, is it reasonable to expect mining companies to make some contribution towards that effort?
Senator, the way, let me answer that one this way. We have said over the years that we would support a reasonable net royalty. Now, there are, as you've heard me say before, there are issues about that, including that we should look at total government take. And when you look at total government take in the form of taxes and royalties to state and local governments, the amount that you pay to operate in Nevada is really commensurate with what we would pay to operate in Australia or Canada. That said, we support a reasonable net royalty. Net royalty is preferable because in the hard rock mineral context, the ore bodies are extremely complex and different, and net actually recognizes the difference between ore bodies. You don't have to go about determining what kind of royalty rate for which ore body. The other thing I would note is the way we have to remember the state and local taxes, because the way the mining law was set up to begin with was it really left taxation and royalties to state governments. It's interesting because when they pulled oil and gas out of the mining law in 1920, they made the royalty a federal royalty, but then the federal government collects it and then distributes it back to the states. Yeah. And so with that, I would say that we support we would support actually a reasonable net royalty that is earmarked at first for abandoned mine land reclamation.
Great. No, that's very helpful. So it sounds like the main issues here are creating some sort of regulatory certainty and permitting certainty so that that capital doesn't have to be ridiculously patient. There's the issue of actually being able to have some sort of revenue source that is reasonable to be able to clean up the existing mine lands problem. And then the issue that Mr. Wood brought up of some level of discretion within the public land management agencies so that you don't get into the sort of intractable arguments that oftentimes lead to litigation. Do you foresee, Mr. Haddock, a potential sort of global solution here where you could have a lot more certainty at the front end and then come up with a reasonable number that does take into account those variations and then be able to have a more predictable way to clean up all of the legacy issues?
I think all of those things can happen without wholesale revision of the mining law. Those are discrete issues that I think can be addressed discreetly. My view on kind of certainty up front is that's what the BLM's land resource planning process is about. And I think that's where the certainty needs to come. That's where the resources that need to be protected need to be identified, because once you start exploring, you need to be able to continue.
So you basically need a map of like where this is going to be embraced and it's permissive, and where the places where maybe there's enough of a conflict that it's not appropriate.
And that process exists and is in place today in the BLM districts.
Thank you.